Namaste and greetings, and welcome to IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute's Web Policy Talk. Today, we have gathered for our special series, The State of Development Discourses, #Cohesive Development with Prof Sunil Ray, which is organized by IMPRI Center for Human Dignity and Development. And today we have gathered for a special lecture on global unemployment and inequality during 1991 to 2019, reflections from secondary data by Prof Ranjit Singh Ghuman. I'm pleased to introduce all of the panelists today for this gathering. Our moderator, Prof Sunil Ray, is former director at Sinha Institute of Social Studies, Patna, and also advisor at CDECS and IMPRI. Prof Ranjit Singh Ghuman, the speaker for today's lecture, is professor of Eminence, Guru Nanak Dev University, Amritsar, and he was also a former professor at Great Chandigarh. We are also joined by Professor Vinoj, who is professor at Center for Development Studies, and Dr. Sridevi, who is associate professor in Department of Economics, School of Economics, Hyderabad Central University, as discussants. I welcome all of you to this deliberation, and we look forward to learning from you all. With that, now I invite Professor Sunil Ray for his opening remarks and to invite Professor Ghuman for his lecture. Sunil sir, over to you. Please unmute yourself, sir. Sunil sir, please unmute yourself. Please unmute yourself, Sunil sir. So bottom left, please unmute. So we are not able to hear you, Professor Ray. Yes, we can.
Sir, are you hearing me now? Are you hearing me now?
We can hear you now. Yes, please go ahead.
Are you hearing?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. So I am audible to you now?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your very brief introduction. At the same time, giving an opportunity again to chair this or moderate this particular discussion. It's a very important topic. In fact, when I came to know about this particular article being written by Professor Ghuman and Professor Sharma together on this one, on the whole issue of employment problem throughout the globe, having taken up 182 countries, studied for a longer period of time, from 1991 to 2019. Well, this is when it really came to my notice, we all thought, in fact, that it's good that IMPRI has taken it up for a discussion further. Before I speak a little bit about this topic, introducing, I must say a few words about this, the attempt being made with the IMPRI, which I have been doing for any other session that I do moderate. Is a very important opportunity for every one of us to really intellectually excel ourselves, to see through, if possible, something a very different kind of avenue for intellectual exercise. We have been reproducing the knowledge, not recreating the knowledge, but not creating. We are not producing and repeating the same stories going on. So IMPRI has come up with a different forum altogether to churn out new ideas, new thought, or something which is very challenging in some sense to the systemic order. At the same time, is always looking forward to see a reconstruction of the system that does take place in an appropriate manner, especially for the people, for those who are downtrodden, marginalized, and so on and so forth. So it is in this context that this cohesive development forum is being formed. And here the different ideological or theoretical challenges being taken up to debate on, to see that something very concrete, relevant comes out without going by stereotype discussions and so on. So it is in this context that we thought that we should have a discussion on these issues being raised by Professor Ranjit Singh Ghuman and Professor Rajiv Sharma on the whole questions of unemployment problem throughout the globe. Now, having said this one, we have already, I think, 15 to 16, or maybe that around 9:20, webinar have taken place on different topics, coming experts from the country, from abroad, or talk on different topics, but within the framework of what should be done. The question is that, always underlying question is that, what is that we are going to do about it? Well, we know the problem. This is fantastic, very nicely, systematically, scientifically, a particular problem is being diagnosed in social sciences, whether it's a political science or economics or sociology or anthropology, whatever it is, or environmental economics. Now, systematically being discussed, analyzed, but then where to go? Is it that we are going to roam within the same box or going outside the box? If we really intend to go outside the box, we need to reconstruct. And it is this attempt that really motivates some of us really look forward to see something, a different kind of reconstruction takes place of the very basic premises of social sciences, the premises of development. In other words, the development epistemology really addresses a different forum, different way altogether. This is the forum that really looks forward to see that it's possible for us to make a breakthrough into the theory that we have been existing, the extant theories. We are teaching, we are learning, and reproducing the same stories without really looking for a solution. Unemployment problem is one of those that has been taken up, Professor Ghuman. I've gone through his paper. I'm not going to speak on his behalf, but as a preliminary comments, I must say it's an outstanding work Professor Ghuman has taken up. He did it very painstaking work, I must say, collecting the data from 182 countries from different sources and putting them together. And then within male, female, underdeveloped, developed, in the sense that highly developed, middle developed, low developed, and the poorest of poor countries all over the world. And across, the states, other countries, for a period of time, putting them and seeing what are the problems really facing in so far as the unemployment problem is concerned, different types of problems. It's very important. And it's very enlightening also at this juncture. Why it is so? Because many, Professor Ghuman, I think our panelists also agree with me on this one, is that quite a few discussions have been going on. I've been a part of those discussions, whether in IMPRI conduct or somewhere else, either I'm chairing or presenting. But then whole issue of unemployment, as though it is something something very important only just because COVID-19 has taken place and is there, and large number of people migrated from the urban area to the rural area, they remain unemployed and so on. And they are being thrown out from the job, especially in the informal sector, and also from the formal sector to a great extent. So it is a serious unemployment problem. But the question is that, yes, to agree is aggravating, did aggravate. But the much more important note, Professor Ghuman, his study is up to 2019, before what is called COVID-19. So COVID-19 gives a different kind of a challenge that we can take up later on. But systematically, as a system that is in place, produce, to generate income, to create income, to generate income, to create employment. The system is in place throughout the world. And what is that efficacy of the system in terms of employment generation? Now, this is here, the whole debate that comes to my mind as I briefly talk about, and which he has touched upon this one also. After the First World War, just simply, perhaps What is why? All of you are experts, you know much better than me, but then let me just have a refreshing kind of a understanding of the whole thing. You have this after First World War. This has been this, especially the market economics, free market economics. They continuously started talking about the full employment and all that. But full employment never took place. And you had this Great Depression in the 1930s. I'm just briefly touching upon. And then Keynes appeared. And Keynes argued that if you cannot have full employment, it is just caution that it's impossible for us to have the full employment. The neoclassical economics or the free market economics, they say that, okay, if you use the wage rate, you manipulate the wage rate, okay, and then the Keynes argued against this one and said that every one of us know, I'm just simply putting the whole thing in a perspective, that if you really decrease, or in other words, the real wages, or the wages decline, ability to purchase or the purchasing power declines. That means that majority of the people will have less command over the resources. They cannot purchase, they cannot come to the market. And therefore, aggregate demand will fall. But economics, the Keynes of the law declining effect demand, but Marx called it the realization crisis. And then what happens, it is what's called cyclical effect investment, because people will not be, the investors will not invest in production, and therefore employment will decline. So in other words, by reducing the wage rate, full employment can never be achieved. It means the state has to really come forward. State has to do something to see that employment creation or employment generation takes place. Kelesky, you must be knowing about this, just reminding you, he supported Keynesian theory. And then, again, I'm not elaborating on that one, but simply supported this. The state has a great role to play. And then you had what's called, you had Friedman. And you know the Friedman thesis. And the Friedman talks about that, okay, there has to be some natural rate of unemployment. Therefore, the manipulation or rather fiscal policy or monetary policy should not be really manipulated. Should not be subsidized. It means that. That means the natural rate of unemployment has to be there. But if you do not accept the natural rate of unemployment, and if you use your fiscal instruments, there is inflation that's going to take place. And talked about his thesis all is about. Well, Friedman's ideas certainly had some relevance. I mean, somehow the neoclassical economics found its relevance sometime during the 1970s, when the oil price skyrocketed. But the inflation, but the unemployment also declined. Employment declined, unemployment rose. So there is a stagflation sort of situation. I'm not going to get into that, but then finally, before what's called this collapse, 2008, 7-8, you had good employment situation that disproved the neoclassical proposition. And then after that, you had a different story altogether about recession. In other words, neoclassical economics time and again proved to be faulty. The employment generation, because time and again they said that forget about the rest of the things. It is the market that will solve all the problem. Leave it to the market. Generate employment. And then actually it never happened. It never has been happening. And inequality has been a persistent story throughout the economy, not only in India, throughout the world, especially those which are following this kind of a capitalist form of production. And then you had, after this recession, after this collapse, what is this we would see? Recession, the great recession. We don't call it a depression, but the recession. Recession has been going on. And once the recession started, again, the big problem in the whole of market, and the government started pumping in money. Even go back to Keynesian economics of a different kind and pumping money, whether the Federal Reserve from America or Indian Reserve Bank or so on. Almost all these countries started pumping it to see that the challenge doesn't really get dysfunctional. Economics revives. But unfortunately, or whatever it may be, it did not revive. It has a tremendous problem. Now, one study, why I put this one, the question is that, is this theoretical propositions or postulations correct? If I really see this Professor Ranjit Singh Ghuman's understanding, the observation, somehow I do have a reason to feel, really see that the theoretical postulations of the market economy is something which is misguiding the population, misguiding the people, misguiding the countries and economy. And it goes on. Question is that then finally we need to see how to really overcome this kind of a problem. Professor Ghuman, I think, there's a very interesting question that you have raised, but at the same time, it's necessary for us to address the theoretical construction based on which these things have come up, or these are the scenario that we have been witnessing. Having said all that, may I stop over here to request Professor Ghuman? I felt like sharing the theoretical perspective that is there lying. You did mention in your paper somewhere or the other some of these things, but then you do question about the sustainable development. Again, I have certain serious reservations on those issues, but we'll discuss about it later. But it's a very, very eye-opening works, I must say, at this stage, when everybody, because in some paper I wrote earlier, now today you have the farmers' agitation sitting on the road for demanding the real wages, right prices for their own goods. Tomorrow it is the unemployed people who are going to sit on the roads in India, not only in India, through the third world countries, from the rest of the countries of the world perhaps. But in India, I could see that this is the kind of scenario you're going to encounter and nobody can stop it. The problem is that we need to have a different, do you need a different system or within the system? That is again the question which Professor Ranjit Ghuman should be able to really respond to the queries at later stage. But then may I request Professor Ghuman to present his thesis for all that he has observed. Thank you so much. With this very, I welcome all the participants and all the discussions to have a very lively discussion on the issues that Professor Ghuman is going to raise. Thank you so much. Professor Ghuman.
Thank you so much, Professor Sunil Ray, for introducing the theme and saying nice words about our paper. Let me say that I had the opportunity to meet you at in Patna when I visited the Patna in 2017, and also to Mr. Vinoj Abram earlier. Good afternoon to everybody and participating in this seminar, panelists and all. Let me at the very outset express my thanks to IMPRI, Center for Human Dignity and Development, and the Center for Development Communication and Studies, Jaipur, for giving me this opportunity to speak in its series of the State of Development Discourses, Cohesive Development. And for that, I really appreciate the effort of the IMPRI, especially Dr. Simmi Mehta and Dr. Arjun Kumar. They are really doing a good work to organize this course on this very, very important theme, that is a cohesive development series. I think this is a problem which is facing India as well as the entire world, whether developed countries are underdeveloped or developing. Every country is facing the problem. And Professor Ray has very well set the tone and contextualized the issue that what after all is the reason that we are trying to, economic theory as well as empirical evidence is trying to highlight all these issues and also trying to address the issues. But somehow or other, growth and the percolation theory or trickle down theory has not affected these issues the way it should have been addressed. But for poverty, but for absolute poverty, the other things are yet to be addressed. And that is why I, along with my colleague, Dr. Rajiv Kumar, we decided to work on it. And as a precursor to it, I did some work during 2006-2009, when I was with the Punjabi University Patiala and enjoying the UGC Research Award. At that time, I did work on growth, human development, poverty, and inequality in South Asia. That, of course, due to many other engagements, I could get it published, but in the years to come, it's on my agenda. Anyway, in fact, ever since the Washington Consensus particularly, and ever since the new liberal economic paradigm the world has adopted over the period of time, and Joseph Stiglitz and Piketty and others have exposed all these issues and have addressed what's the role of IMF, World Bank, and all that in the international institutions. Not going into the detail, let me also thank the moderator, Professor Sunil Ray, and the discussants, Professor Vinoj Abraham and Dr. G. Sridevi, for sparing their valuable time. And you know, as Professor Sunil has already introduced, I will speak on growth, unemployment, and poverty. And my hypothesis is that growth, unemployment, poverty, inequality, and human development are closely intertwined with each other and among themselves. So there is a correlation, multicollinearity, all that. All of them are the manifestation of development paradigm and the mode of production. Let me say that. And the distribution of the benefits of growth is also the manifestation of development paradigm and the mode of production. And probably here lies the crux of the problem, that the world has experienced growth over the period of time, but somehow or other, the distribution question is still haunting all the nations. And this you can appreciate by the ever increasing inequality, whether you say 1%, 99% of Joseph Stiglitz, or Piketty, when he says capital return on capital, when it is higher than the growth rate, there is a problem and all that. And he also highlights that in the 19th century, the issue of poverty has been quite addressed. But since 1020 to 1819, there has been the role of state, particularly welfare state, which has addressed the issues. But the entire phenomena is very complex. It's not very easy to comprehend all that, whether you talk of Abhijit Banerjee's Poor Economics or his Nobel laureate work and all that. This is really, the entire phenomena is very complex, and so long there exists uneven distribution of growth, the debate on causal relationship between growth, human development, poverty, and inequality shall always be relevant. And to my mind, it will be a never-ending debate, and hence would remain an unsettled debate for at least for decades to come. Economic literature is quite heavily loaded with this all this debate. There are hundreds of references to this in this area. Now, the trickle-down theory is still a distant mirage. Rather, many dimensions of poverty and inequality or relative poverty have cropped up over the period of time. The UNDP came up with multidimensional poverty in 2010 Human Development Report, though we earlier had 20 reports before that since 1990. Now, similarly, the unemployment too, apart from its various types, whether it is a seasonal unemployment or underemployment or disguised unemployment, whatever it is, or voluntary or involuntary, there is vulnerable unemployment, and there are people who are working but still poor. You may refer to Arjun Sen Gupta report of 2007, where he said that 77% of Indian population is still living on 20 rupees a day per kg.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
The people are working but are always under vulnerability to even minor economic shocks. As Professor Sunil was referring to COVID-19, it was not a minor shock, it was a very major shock, and the nations across the board could not effectively address it, and the system has got exposed in a big way. So then there are this is endless debate, but with Thomas Piketty's book, Capital in the 21st Century, which came in 2014, as his foundation that rate of return on capital is higher than the growth rate, leads to concentrate of wealth, which in turn leads to increase in inequality and so on. But where this Piketty underlines that when rate of return is on capital exceeds rate of growth of the economy, then there arises some serious problems with the system, and inequality starts rising. IMF study in 2016, however, challenged Piketty's fundamentals, and they run a regression equation between income inequality and return on capital. But Piketty differs with the IMF study in the sense that inequality is not only income inequality, it's wealth inequality, which is and return on wealth and rentier class or others. When it goes above the growth rate, it creates problems. So IMF study still is not addressing the issue which Piketty has addressed it. And income, it is not only income inequality. That is why UNDP's first time introduction of multidimensional poverty is very, very important, which it introduced in 2010. Now, paradoxically, the growth could not satisfactorily address the issues of multidimensional poverty, neither of working poor nor of vulnerable employment. Though to a large extent, it has reduced the incidence of absolute poverty. However, the number of poor has increased over the period of time. Now, Abhijit V. Banerjee and Esther Dalpo's jointly written book, Poor Economics, Rethinking Poverty and the Ways to End It, may be of some use to address the issue of poverty. Having said that, let me share with you that the status of unemployment during 1991-2019 across the 182 countries and the inequality across 124 countries during 2000 and 2017, that is 17 years. This has been, this puts a question mark on the kind of development paradigm which the world have been pursuing for the well over 30 years, 1991 to 2019. And I fully agree with Professor Sunil Ray that as this study covers only 2019, after 2019, what happened during the COVID-19 era, which still has its lagged, rather full impact or lagged impact on unemployment, poverty, vulnerable unemployment, and multidimensional poverty. This needs to be studied, and scholars have already studied, but it will require a longer time to study the lagged impact of this COVID-19 impact. So thus, I would speak largely on unemployment and poverty, inequality. As I said earlier, the paper dwells on the secondary data pertaining to 182 countries in the case of unemployment and 124 countries in the case of inequality. And the sources of data are World Bank data and the UNDP data for inequality. And the division of countries is as per World Bank classification, that is upper income, upper middle income, lower middle income, and lower income, and all. And division of 124 countries is as per UNDP's Human Development Index. So what we have studied is the period covered is that of 30 years. The first reference point is 1991, and the second reference point is 2019. That besides unemployment and inequality, the paper also discusses vulnerable employment and working poor. This is again a very, very serious problem, particularly in the informal sector. Now, as per World Bank classification, all the 182 countries under study have been classified into 4 categories: low income, lower middle income, and upper middle income. So in our 182 countries, we have 28 low income countries, 48 lower middle income countries, and 50 upper middle income countries. This is the classification of 182 countries. And as per and 56 high income countries. Now, on the basis of per capita income as on July 8, 2019, low income are those with per capita income of $1,025 or less in 2018. Lower middle income countries, $126 to $3,995. Upper middle income countries, $3,996 to $12,375. High income countries beyond $12,376. So this is the classification of all those countries. Now, with regard to inequality, the data pertains to 124 countries, and the classification of the country is the low human development countries, 31 countries, medium human development, 27 countries, high human development, 31 countries, and very high human development, 35 countries. So in all, total 124 countries. So having worked on that, what we have done is that we try to look into the question of unemployment and inequality, and thereby we have put a question mark on the consumption-led growth model or neoliberal development strategy. Now you see this free play of market forces, precursor to the neoliberal development paradigm, has never been approved even by liberal economists, but we can talk of the Chicago School of Thought, Milton Friedman and others who have been advocating, and many others, this free play of market forces. But if you recall the Pearson Commission's report 1969, where he says the failure to create meaningful employment is most tragic failure of development. This is the issue which we have tried to address. And Piketty says that then Nobel laureate Stiglitz says that capitalism is failing to produce what was promised, but is delivering on what was not promised. What was not promised was inequality, pollution, unemployment, and most important of all, the degradation of the values of the point to the point where everything is acceptable and no one is accountable. So this whole scenario is because of, I think, the underlying fact which Stiglitz, Pearson, Commission, and Piketty have brought out. And then we have tried to emphasize that this the famous Keynesian equation, that if you don't have the purchasing power, you don't have, it will affect your aggregate demand function. And the rising inequality and rising unemployment are stubbornly obstinate rate of unemployment and increasing number of unemployed persons is a drag on the purchasing power, and thereby a drag on the aggregate demand function. And probably the consumption data speaks about it, particularly since 2008 Great Recession. And even in India, 2017 data was not made public for quite some time, which shows that aggregate demand has shrinked. And this was, to my mind, this was mainly because of shrinking of purchasing power or concentration of purchasing power in a block. We can investigate the reasons for that. Probably we will not be able to address those issues here in 25 minutes. Now, then if I briefly summarize global unemployment, then I will say that over the span of, say, almost 3 decades, the global unemployment increased from 68 million in 1991 to 111 million in 2019. So as compared to it, the male labor force increased by 46.95%. The male unemployment rate increased from 4.76% in 1991 to 5.28% in 2019. All this indicate that there has been a net loss of unemployment in absolute sense during this period. And we know that in India also, in the first decade of 21st century has witnessed almost jobless growth, but now we are experiencing jobless growth. So the situation in other countries with minor degree of variation may be the same. Similarly, in the case of female unemployment, it increased from 44 million in 1991 to 74 million in 2019. So as compared to this, female unemployment, as compared to 69.73% increase in female unemployment, the female labor force and female population increased by 45% and 43% respectively. So this shows that the unemployment, increase in unemployment in the number of unemployed females is not due to increase in female population, neither it's due to increase in the workforce in female and all that. So country-wise, we have done exercise that gender-wise unemployment in 182 countries and 90 further split we have done. And let me share with you that as Professor Sunil Ray was referring to the concept of full employment, we have taken 5-6 categories of unemployment rate, up to 5%, 5 to 10%, 10 to 15%, 15 to 20%, 20 to 25%, and beyond 25%. So I will not be able to share all the data which we have, but one thing I can share with you that the number of countries where unemployment was less up to 5% was almost the same at 2 point of times. But in the case of female, it bit declined. But it has been reflected in the higher number of number of countries where unemployment was 5 to 10%. So or 10 to 15%. So the number of countries either remained the same or it has increased. Similarly, in the case of 15 to 20%, the number of countries remained 13 in both the at both points, but 13, the number of countries in fact declined in the case of male unemployment and also in the case of female unemployment. The situation, of course, in the bracket 20 to 25%, the number of countries was quite small, but it still is 4, 5, 6 countries. Now, then female unemployment is also depicting the same case which I have said earlier, and then we have tried to focus on the gender-wise youth unemployment. This is rather presents a grimmer story as compared to overall unemployment. Now, in the case of 5% unemployment, up to 5%, the number of countries increased, declined from 46 to 25 in the case of males, and from 49 to 24 in the case of females. But in the bracket of 5 to 10%, the number of countries in the case of males increased from 42 to 43, and in the case of females from 35 to 42. So number of countries in the higher bracket has increased, and almost the same situation from 26 countries to 38 in the case of males, that is in the bracket of 10 to 15% unemployed, and in the case of 15 to 20% unemployed, the number of countries at 2 point of time remained 27 in the case of males, and it increased by 1 country from 20 to 21 in the case of female. Similarly, in the case of 20 to 25% unemployed bracket, the number of countries increased from 15 to 20 in the case of males, and from 12 to 18 in the case of females. And the next, greater than 25%, this poses a very serious problem. And the number of countries in the case of males was 26 in 1991, which increased to 29 in 2019. And in the case of female, it increased from 38 to 50 countries. So you can well imagine that youth unemployment increased, not only in terms of number or the rate of unemployed, but in the case of absolute number of unemployed in both the cases. Then vulnerable employment and working poor is another serious problem which we have tackled too. And the number of countries having male vulnerable unemployment up to 5% increased from 7 to 9. And all were upper middle income and high income countries. Now, it is not lower income or lower middle income countries. Similarly, all were in the range of 5 to 10%. All 19 countries were upper income countries and high income countries. So you can well imagine upper income countries and high income countries are experiencing higher and higher male vulnerable employment. So employment, nature of employment and employment there is quite vulnerable. Then female vulnerable employment is also the same. Then in the case of number of that is vulnerable employment, all countries then come in that bracket, which you can say the number of countries between 15 to 20% increased from 12 to 13, which includes 4 upper middle income and 6 high income countries. So out of 13, 10 are upper income and high income countries. So you can well imagine that growth rate and high income per capita higher income doesn't address the vulnerability of employment. Then the number of countries having male vulnerable employment above 25% declined in lower middle income countries, upper middle income countries, and lower income countries. And in the case of females, 5% vulnerable employment up to 5% was 18 in 1991 as well as 29. So there was no change in over the period of time. Significantly, all the 18 fall in the category of upper middle income countries and high income countries. This is probably something is that I don't say whether we can postulate the hypothesis or not, that as you go to higher bracket or not. Should I, Sunil, should I continue now? Okay. Then working poor. You are not audible. You are not audible, Prof Sunil. You are not audible.
Please unmute, sir. If you.
Okay. Are you? Am I audible now?
Yeah.
What I'm saying that, Professor Ghuman, my request is that instead of getting into the nitty-gritty, you have done extensively, very great work, extensively, male, female, and the different types of countries and all that.
Okay.
Now, so it will be difficult for people to remember everything at a time.
Yeah.
You just concentrate on what pattern is emerging out of that. What is the pattern? What is exactly the dominant pattern?
Okay.
So, and you can give some example like this, so that will be great.
Okay.
Thank you. Follow me. I mean, that is difficult to remember.
Thank you. So I now switch on to working poor, and that criteria is $3.1 per day per person.
No, 1 minute, Professor Ghuman. Say, for example, I may ask you a question, but just to know. Now, you have a set of developing countries or poor countries, put them one side. And the rich countries, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 rich countries. And now my question could be, if you can explain it, now vulnerable employment, those who are vulnerable.
Pardon.
Where the degree of vulnerability is very high, whether developing countries or developed countries. Now, male population, female participation has declined all over, and a country like India has declined much more. Okay. Is it the phenomena even the rich countries or in India more? You put it because everybody will have the access to your paper, all the nitty-gritty. But if you give this kind of a trend, like for example, if we say that vulnerability has been more in third world countries like India, as compared to the developed countries, then one issue. But then again, if you say that vulnerability everywhere is more, there's another set of questions it raises, which is very important. Like this.
Let me say that what we have observed from the Scandi data is that vulnerability is higher in upper income countries and upper middle income countries than the poor income countries. But unemployment is higher in the upper income countries, in the lower middle income countries and poor countries. And vulnerability, they are working poor, number of working poor and rate of working poor is higher in poor countries, and the lower income countries. This is the situation.
Is a distress employment.
Yeah.
In poor countries.
You may call it vulnerable or distress, whatever you call it. But it is higher in poor countries, and that includes low income countries as well as lower middle income countries. This is the situation.
Right.
Now then, inequality is again very, very serious problem. Inequality, economic theory says that if the Gini ratio is up to 27%, there are some studies, it is favorable to growth. But if it exceeds 27%, it's unfavorable to growth. And our data shows that what we have taken is 25 to 27%, and then beyond 27%. And I will focus on beyond 27%. That is 27% to 36%. The number of countries increased from 45 to 48 at 2 point of references. And 36 to 46, the number of countries increased from 42 to 50. And all types of countries, low HDI, medium HDI, very high HDI, and high HDI. All types of countries are there. Now then 46 to 56 Gini ratio, the number of countries of course decreased from 23 to 17, but still 17 countries are there. So this means the income inequality, it's only income inequality has because Gini ratio is for income inequality.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you see, if you add multidimensional poverty or the wealth inequality with it, probably it will be much higher than simply the income inequality. And that is the point which Piketty is emphasizing over the period of time, that it is not the income inequality only which is serious, but the wealth inequality is also very, very serious. So all these, in fact, tells us that two things I would, to my mind, and which we have observed, is that is new liberal model of growth and new liberal development paradigm answer to the poverty, inequality, unemployment, and all types of unemployment, including vulnerable and working poor, and inequality. Is it the answer? To my mind, it is not the answer to address these issues. We will have to look beyond neoliberal growth. Second is that will we be able to run the growth, consumption-led growth machine in the times to come in the face of increasing inequality, stubbornly high unemployment, high proportion of working poor, inequality, and all that? Will it be? Will we be able to run the consumption-led growth machine? If the answer to it is no, then my point of view is I would like to emphasize that it is not even in the interest of the capitalist growth model, because there is inbuilt problem with it, that if the consumption falls, if the purchasing power shrinks with the large sections of the people, you will not be able to produce, and it will further generate unemployment and all types of unemployment, and it will further increase vulnerability. So I think that issue needs to be taken into account. And in fact, when we started working on it, it was quite heavy on our mind that at least we should see what happened to particularly these three parameters, that is unemployment, inequality, and all types of unemployment. And of course, data was not available. Even Piketty says not many countries have data for wealth inequality. And the kind of policies which are being pursued, abolition of wealth tax, are not taxing the rich or decreasing the burden of taxation on the rich, or even subsidizing the rich, as we are having in many states of India. I think this will further increase inequality. So just to conclude, I will say that the problem of persistently high unemployment, vulnerable employment, working poor, high inequality, and deceleration in household consumption must be addressed in an effective and proactive manner, so that purchasing power goes into the hands of people facing multidimensional deprivation and vulnerability. This is the only recipe for sustaining the market-driven consumption-led growth model, sustainable development in the long run. If it doesn't happen, it questions the sustainable development goals of the UNDP. And then I would say that the world came out of Great Depression of 1930s with a similar policy measure, and this is what is needed to address the ongoing Great Recession and maintain the socio-economic and political stability in the world. Because poverty anywhere, or deprivation of anywhere, or even sense of deprivation anywhere is threat to prosperity. And the protagonists of new liberal development paradigm needs to come out of denial mode and listen to the senior voices. In other words, trickle down of growth, benefits, and distribution of income in favor of poor, unemployed, and vulnerable employed persons is the only recipe to sustain. And at the end, I would like to say that when Pictet says that new paradigm of growth, which is a social democratic system, which is a need of the hour, and it should be. I think that that is important. So to address the series, the gravity of unemployment, poverty, and inequality, we shall have to look beyond the new liberalism, which is akin to hyper capitalism. I think this we are heading towards hyper capitalism, which needs to be addressed. And Pictet says that we need to think about a new way of going beyond capitalism, a new form of socialism, participative and decentralized, federal and democratic, ecological, multilateral, and feminist. This, in fact, he has highlighted in the latest book, Time for Socialism, which came in October 2021. That I think, and he pleads for social democratic system. Particularly, he refers to France, Germany, and Sweden. That's all. So with this, I would like to thank all the panelists and the IMPRI organization for giving me this opportunity, and hope that I have taken, I do admit that I may have taken 5-7 minutes more than what the time was allotted to me. Thank you very much for giving me patience hearing. And now I close this my talk. The comments of discussions and questions are welcome, and I will try to address if I could. Thank you very much.
So yeah, is it over, Professor Ghuman?
No. Sorry.
Yes, over to you, Professor Ray.
Yeah, can I? Shall I begin the proceedings?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Professor Ghuman, really very interesting, and not only I would say interesting, but very, very important. It's highly penetrating, and the way this whole thing you have summed up is something I find that the question now, after hearing you, why is it that we are sticking to this kind of a system? Why is it that we have been teaching the same story throughout all over the country and the world? That look, this is the only way through which you can resolve the crisis. These are the questions which are going to come and which are coming now. The alternative economics people do talk about in various countries. In fact, I have been writing quite a bit on that. Let me tell you, Professor Ghuman, now there are few that you have raised which are very important and basic. Now we are being taught right from the beginning of our career, and we are teaching even now also. It is a growth and growth. And the pre-market economics have taught us is the growth that resolved the entire crisis of the humanity of civilization. So economic growth is a consumption-led, growth-oriented model that need to be followed, as you said very clearly. And we have been like a parrot. We have been teaching every student, every university. We are also taught, learned about it, and throw it them. And they said that what? Oh, if you grow, it will be, as you said, trickle down. The question of trickle down thesis and the growth is something which is illusion. Is time and again being proved, and your thesis, your work has proved very clearly based on the data that you collected from different sources, international sources, that clearly shows that is an illusion that is being created. Is a kind of a what is called, sort of a cock and bull story being produced, and that is what we have been teaching us. I was there in IDS when this new liberal, in 1992, Institute of Development Studies in Jaipur, and the top, what is called, advisor of Manmohan Singh and all these people were there. And there was a huge meeting on this one. I still remember your lecture reminds me of the same story, that they kept on saying that, look, a new era is going to begin. New economy is going to start. We'll be able to resolve all the crises, unemployment problem particularly. Well, that was way back in 1992, 91, 92. We have crossed only 25 years or so. What is that you are confronting with today? It's before you. You explain, and every one of us knows. Don't reduce the whole problem to COVID-19. There is a trend or tendency in the hearts and minds of the people. Oh, this problem has really occurred so very badly because of COVID-19. It's ridiculous. It's a purely systemic problem with the system that you have been following. And now reducing the systemic problem to COVID, as though COVID-19 nahi hoga to everything will be all right. This is something which is there. Now, your study up to 2019 shows what, and which is correct. Now, today, if there is a COVID, even COVID-19 aggravated the situation, as you said very rightly, aggravated the vulnerability, aggravated the unemployment problem much seriously. Is the nakedness of the economy is being exposed to the people. That is what exactly on the question of employment is here. Now, today, Manmohan Singh has spent his career over there in the government with jobless growth. Huge debate, I still remember. Growth, but jobless. But look at today also. The government, Niti Aayog, they're all talking. Even the last budget, everywhere talking about 9% growth. Tomorrow, maybe the 10% will become. Day after tomorrow, we don't know what statistics talk about. Growth are never calculated down. Distribution theory that you talked about is never happens. Your systemic approach is something we never do, as you said, that concentration of wealth that is there. Now, my question today is that how to get out of it. Now, it's a very systematic study that you have made, and now our discussants are there who are going to comment on that. Let's see what every one of us, everybody, they learn is discussions, think about it, speak about it, and see how really we are able to really, channelize the discussion to a meaningful manner, to see that something, as you said at the end, there is a solution, a social democratic way, maybe a different paradigm that you should think about. And now, in many forums, I have talked about the different paradigm. Maybe the little bit of that I will share here, the different development paradigm where the employment can be generated, created, I would say that, and so and so. That is a different story altogether. Now I'm requesting Professor Abraham to enlighten us through his comments, reactions, and questions. Professor Vinoj Abraham.
Yes, am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Ray, for giving me this time slot. At the outset, let me also thank Dr. Arjun, Dr. Simi, and IMPRI for this opportunity to share a few of my thoughts over here in their platform. And thank you, Professor Ranjit Singh Ghuman. I also have very fond memories of meeting you at least 2 or 3 times in Patiala during various occasions. We have been meeting once, so in 2-3 times we have met already during various occasions. It was very good to meet you. And Of course, the paper, as Professor Ray has already talked about, it's a very rich paper. It's a very rich paper dealing with it's a very vast canvas that you have drawn, and taking a long period of time, and taking a vast number of countries. So yes, I mean, sometimes you need to take a worldview about what is happening. I mean, usually economists or increasingly other social sciences, they tend to kind of focus too much on the micro. They keep on saying that we should be getting into more and more micro level studies to understand what is actually happening. But sometimes it is good actually to step back and get a worldview about what's going on across the world over a long period of time, kind of what we call as long duration studies. I mean, get a sense about what's going on in the world, and that actually gives you more understanding about the micro level data also. So I think that way, your attempt to look at this problem, the problem is well known. Unemployment, the nexus between unemployment, inequality, growth, human development, this a problem is quite well known. But the canvas that you have tried to draw over a period of time across countries, I think that is what makes the paper quite interesting also. I mean, these things are discussed in every country probably. In India, of course, we discuss about these issues, the problem of unemployment, inequality, human development, growth, all these issues we discuss. But then we don't tend to compare with other countries or other regions, and tend to think as if these are problems that are private to India, and not so much problems relating to other developing countries. So I think that's one very interesting contribution in terms of putting it in perspective, that these are not problems that are very unique to India, but these are cross-country problems, and these are global problems, and these are not like problems that are being shifted away from one part of the world to the other. Because certain types of theories we do hear about this thing, that the developed world's problems are kind of transferred to the developing world, and the developed world is devoid of problems now. But that's not the picture that you are throwing also, right? I mean, you're showing that unemployment is a problem, both in the developed world. Unemployment of a different nature is a problem with the underdeveloped world. So that way, it's quite interesting to see your work. Now, I would want to throw on some light on the discussions, kind of take the discussion a bit further from where you had stopped. I'm sure it's because of the lack of time and lack of space that you probably had not entered into some of these areas of discussion. But I thought that it would be interesting to get into some of these discussions with regard to, we do understand this jobless growth story we have been hearing for some time, but the mechanism through which how it works, I think so that has changed. I think that is important to kind of get into that and kind of understand that also a little bit. For instance, my focus, I would want to look into the what we call as the increasing importance of technology, the rapidly rising importance of technology in all the variables that we had spoken about, in terms of unemployment, in terms of inequality, in terms of growth, and its significance on human development. Right? Now, technology is indeed playing a very important role, and increasingly there are a large number of studies which talks about how technology actually divides the working population into less skilled and high skilled, and the demand for less skilled being kind of declining over a period of time, and that itself kind of becoming the driving force for growth, being the economic growth kind of being driven by technology itself, but that technology itself kind of drives out a part of the population as unemployed or kind of vulnerably being employed as such. But that role of the technology, that is what used to happen in the 1990s, when in terms of technology, when we were saying in the 1990s, we were probably talking about computers basically, and that was a big technology that we were talking about. But that has shifted. It has moved on much more. It's not just about standalone computers that we are talking about. I mean, the way in which computers are being used now, technology is being used now. It has moved on from computer to internet to what we call what we call as industrial revolution, fourth industrial revolution, as such. That's what people are talking about, and that has very serious consequences on the way in which the world, across the world, it's not one specific to one country or one particular region as such. Across the world, it is acting as a kind of a cutting what we call a barrier across the populations and cutting the populations into different segments on the basis of education or skill or what we call as what is required for the technology to run us. And that has got a very important role in why this is kind of across the countries, this particular set of technology has very important role in creating this paradigms of unemployment or what we call as vulnerabilities that are being recreated across the countries. It is whether it is developed or developing world, kind of how it is possible to kind of recreate this what we call as the problems associated with technology.
Professor Abram,
with unemployment, inequality.
Professor
How is it
Abram,
possible
are
to
you
recreate these
talking
problems?
about technological unemployment? Unemployment due to the technology?
Yes, unemployment that is created due to technology, but in different countries, it appears as differently. For instance, in our country, it may not appear as unemployment as such. It may appear as vulnerable employment or low-wage employment as such. Because in countries like ours, for instance, technology may not replace people because of the cost in introducing technology as such. But that continues to be an important way of continues to be an important threat for any form of employment, such that people would be ready to work at very low wages. So the vulnerability to being the possibility of being unemployment itself drives down the wages low, and people would be working actually at very low wages as such. Right? So that's one possibility where you don't have what we call as some form of reservation wage or social security mechanism to fall back on. So people would be driving themselves down into low wage work as such. And that's what probably we are seeing in developing world as such, what Professor Ghuman had noted. But in the developed world, we have certain reservation wage or some kind of fallback mechanism where you see the unemployment rate itself being large, because you actually get out of employment because your wage rates, if it starts falling below what you are expecting, because of the kind of surplus that is generated due to technological introduction, and that might be leading to unemployment itself in these regions. Now, the question is not only about technology. Technology had always been there. It's not that ICTs, of course, information technology had come in the recent years as the general purpose technology. And that is kind of entering into all kinds of segments, it is kind of affecting all kinds of production system, whether you're talking about product manufacturing or services, or even in agriculture sector, primary sector, you do find the introduction of these technologies in all these sectors. And it doesn't make much of a difference which tech sector it is entering into. It affects all kinds of production sectors. But the issue is this: how is it possible that a technology is being allowed to enter into all kinds of production systems? Right now, why I'm asking this thing is that the technology per se is neutral. Technology per se does not have. We cannot say that technology is driven on an autonomous fashion. Right? It is driven by itself. Science is driven. Probably science, what we call as random inventions, are driven in an autonomous manner. Even that too, it depends to a large extent on the kind of funding that is there. But technology, what we call as useful technology, that is essentially driven by innovation. And that innovation is driven by market forces. Right? So innovation, and what I'm pointing towards is that the fact that innovation, technology are driven by market forces and allowing the state to withdraw from these kind of areas where vulnerabilities could have been possibly avoided by introducing state level mechanisms, some forms of state level mechanisms. Instead of that, state withdrawing from these kind of regions and allowing technology to seep into those areas where state has disappeared and technology itself is becoming the kind of runner over there. And that is now technology is now able to kind of enter into all kinds of fields. If you look at if you look at, for instance, it is possible to imagine that you can have a technology, a technological intervention that looks into workers' welfare. It is possible to imagine. You can think of a technology where collective bargaining is increased. You can imagine.
One minute. Professor Abram, okay, fine. Why don't you explain it? Like, a technology, state should be in place and technology to be introduced for the welfare increase of the people, of the workers, for example, or for bargaining power. All these things, there should be technology there. Why don't you illustrate? Why don't you explain how it could be imagined? How can it be thought about?
No, what I'm saying is that the state will not be interested in doing that. That's what I'm saying.
That is fine. But what your point is that I agree with you. State will not be interested because state has withdrawn. Now it has left to the market forces. Okay. Now here you are coming with a point which is very important for us to note, that here the technology should be applicable to everywhere, wherever possible, to see that this problem does not regularly, unemployment problem does not regularly occur.
Yeah.
Now, for example, you say that bargaining position of the workers to be enhanced, and here could be a new technology that could be applied for that, even for, like many other things, areas. Can you give some illustrations of that?
Now, see, right now we have a lot of what we call websites, what we call as private websites, like the monster.com, where there is matching facilities that are going on, right? Where there is vacancies are reported, and workers or potential workers can report that they are available for work. That kind of a matching mechanism is going on, right? In the something like monster.com and so these kind of websites are. But they only allow you to kind of match a particular employer with an employee. But assume, I'm not saying that there exists something like this, but assume if suppose there is a collective bargaining possibility, like if a set of workers decide amongst themselves and using technology to say that none of us would be ready to work at a wage that is less than this particular, right? Now, right now we don't have that thing. What used to be as collective. Now, why I'm saying is that technology is being used to fragment workers, right? It is possible to very much possible to fragment workers using this technology, but it is possible also to organize workers using technology, but that will not be done like. There has been attempts in different countries. In Brazil, I've heard that there has been attempts to this thing, but it is not working well. There has been attempts to even organize what we call gig workers, to organize gig workers as such. There has been attempts to do this thing, but has not been very successful. In fact, it has not even been possible for the traditional unions or traditional what we call as collective bargaining processes to enter into new technology areas. Right? There has been very limited success across the world, not only in India, across the world. Though there has been attempts, it's not that it's been completely failed. There has been some attempts. Now, the point that I was trying to make was that it has become possible for capital to use technology and build the institutional mechanisms that is required for capital to enter using technology into arenas of growth that would actually benefit or kind of generate more and more wealth for themselves, right? Technology itself is not, in itself, though it is neutral, not having a color of capital paper, the ability to use, even the ICT, for instance, in the information technology, for instance, allows even the way in which it can be implemented. It can be implemented at extremely low cost compared to earlier technologies. It is a very low cost technology compared to earlier technology. But even when costs are low, it becomes very difficult for that particular technology to be used for any forms of collective bargaining or any forms of workers' distribution. Now, can state enter and improve the law, improve this particular system, improve the lot of, or reduce what we call as reduce the vulnerabilities, reduce inequality through pure institutional mechanism that it used to do earlier? That is not possible. That's what I'm trying to bring it over here. Institutional building up of a social welfare system, for instance, without control over technology will not lead to it. So any system that we are taking, any particular system that we are trying to drive in to improve the lot of workers without considering the fact that technology can drive the economy, and unless we bring in sufficient teeth for the state to have control over how technology is being used and where technology.
Yeah.
You will not be, there won't be much success in terms of the unemployment problem there. And
Right,
I believe that at the root of the problem that we are seeing is long-term unemployment, inequality, unemployment problem is related to technology in one way or the other. In the larger story is technology, but it could be trade, technology, low technology, high technology, trade, or at the underlying story is basically about technologies. I think I'll stop here. Thank you again for this opportunity given, and thanks Professor Ranjit Ghuman for that nice paper that you had. I was just trying to explain some of the trends that you had seen over there. I'll stop. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Abraham. Thank you so much. Now, Professor Ghuman, now next, let the next discussion speak, and then after that you can, react. You can give your reactions and all that. Now, may I request Professor Sridevi to give her comments?
Yeah.
Yes.
Good evening,
Professor
Ghuman. It's very
How are you?
good. I'm fine. Thank you.
You did your PhD from Isaac, am I right?
Yes.
I am also product of Isaac, but much senior to you.
Okay. I did 100%.
I was seeing your biodata. I saw that you're from Isaac, so I'm going to Isaac day after tomorrow.
Oh,
yes.
Okay. Thanks.
You have worked with whom?
Professor Deshpande.
Huh?
Deshpande.
Oh, I see. Very good. So very good, very nice meeting you, Professor Sridevi. Now, why not come out with very solid, penetrative comments? Yes.
I have few comments from the presentation, what I have heard from the Professor Ranjit Singh. It was very interesting and elaborative presentation by the Professor Ranjit. But the first question is that can always growth leads to solving all kinds of problems, reducing the poverty, unemployment, social inequality, whatever it may be. So since last 50 years, we have been seeing that all the growth is taking place. We are not able to solve the most important problems such as poverty, inequality, nutritional insecurity, health insecurity. And we see that among the various groups in terms of gender or in terms of sectors, in terms of income, social groups, there is a rise in the inequality also. But of course, the latest CMI report tries to say that there is a slight decline in the levels of the inequality among the various groups in the context of the India. But without addressing we are talking there exists the economic inequality. Economic inequality is being added with the economic segregation, which is already existing in the markets, various markets, labor market, product market, or the consumer markets. And we are adding all these to the already existing social inequalities. So at least in the context of India, like even if we consider the USA or the West, we always see that the economic segregation and labor market discrimination takes place in terms of gender as well as race, and in Indian context in terms of the caste, religion, whatever it may be. So can we really address the problem of the economic segregation only considering the growth? And the second part is that we see that over the years, access to education has increased. Higher education has increased to both females and the males. But the problem here, when we look at the data, it is very clear that the labor force very clearly shows that the female participation rate in the labor market is declining. In India, overall also. The one argument, if we look at the West and the US, with the decline in the fertility rate, there should be an increase in the female participation and empowerment there should be a decline in the gender wage gap in the market. But we are not seeing that kind of economic activity or decline in the gender wage gap, for example, in the Indian context. Why is that the female unemployment rates are still very high? It's a kind of a paradoxical situation. One side, we have a improvements in access to education. Other side, the fertility rates have declined. But why is that the female labor participation has declined among?
What do you think? What do you think about it? Well, this is the question everybody asks.
Yeah, one reason what I feel is that the already existing market gender discrimination could be one reason. The second, the social discrimination, because getting an opportunity itself is very difficult. The third most important, with the recent studies showing that the various organizations which have released last week saying that the females are now actually, they are not finding time to work in the market because they're spending more time in unpaid work. At least in the last 2 years, the unpaid work of the females has increased drastically. That may be because of shutdown of the schools and various other activities. But it is the trend that the unpaid work hours are increasing, whereas the female labor participation in the actual labor market is declining. So what could be the suggestion, or what do we get from the other countries?
Okay, Professor Sridevi, this is the thing which everybody speaks about, the old stories.
Yeah.
The one which this panel would like to hear from you is that how really this gender discrimination of the market can be removed, number one. Number two is that how is it possible for the women to increase the participation rate within the given system? How is it possible? Do you have a suggestion? This is the way it can be done. I mean, this is something, let us not talk what is being talked about. Now, if you can give some example, or this is the way it can be done. Like, for example, wage discrimination. Males are being paid more than the female with the same type of work. That's been, I think, 200 literature is there on that. Let's not talk about it. The systemic discrimination that means how to get out of it within the given system. That is the question that Professor Ghuman implicitly asking the panelist.
What I think the first question, what you have raised, how do you reduce the gender discrimination in the labor market? The most important, provide the equal opportunities. Even now, the equal opportunities are not provided for the same kind of position. If male and female are applied, it is the chances are very high for the male. That we all know. There are ILO studies, and the in the Indian context also we have. Same is also observed because now the state is withdrawing, as the other expert was also saying that. I agree with that. But the so-called the market, which actually should be depending upon the efficiency levels, are we really looking at their productivity and efficiency levels and trying to provide the employment? No. So that is the basic reason why the discrimination exists. So why can't we actually stick to the providing the employment opportunities based upon the efficiency levels and the productivity levels without making any distinction between the gender, race, religion, or caste, whatever it may be. Once we try to provide such opportunities, maybe if not now, the long run, there may be some change, but we don't see that kind of change. Even we see that the private sector, the so-called private sector or the corporate sector, which is supposed to be very efficient and competitive in nature, but still they follow all discriminatory procedures. Although they say,
absolutely,
they say that we are competitive, we are based upon the competitive nature, we are trying to recruit the people and all that. Are they really providing the same kind of the technical support? And like we always see there exists a glass ceiling in terms of the gender and the caste. So in the corporate, so without, I mean, addressing those things, just talking that we have, if I consider that Telangana state, for example, in terms of per capita income, it has a high per capita income. And in terms of unemployment rate, the January CMI report very clearly says Telangana is the lowest state, 0.71% unemployment rate. But if you look at the other indicators, deprivation, vulnerability, and malnutrition, it is highest. So are we really looking only in terms of some kind of a growth and income of the few people and ignoring the majority and always saying that they are vulnerable, they are discriminated? I mean, is the state or the agencies trying to address why certain groups tries to remain to be vulnerable? No. So my suggestion is that you provide equal opportunities either in terms of education, employment, or even in terms of having the wealth also. Like in the rural India, when Telangana was newly formed, actually the KCR informed everyone that a Dalit woman who do not have any kind of will be given a fertile land of 3 acres. And there is a huge number who are actually eligible. But very few people got through that program. But it made an impact because those females who bought that particular land, have gone for the cultivation of the floriculture or horticulture, whatever it may be, it led to changes in their incomes have changed. And they also focused on the education of the children. So it will have a long run impact. So without, addressing those economic segregation and market discrimination, always trying to say that like better off groups or better off countries are doing better than us, I'm not very sure how we are going to progress in the future without addressing the existing inequalities and wealth inequality, basically. Because even if we consider wealth inequality, poor and unequal countries, the India, what the report basically says, top 10% controlling the 51% of the total income. Without redistribution of the income and without providing better access to education and the labor market, even in the discussion, it also came up that unions should have a collective bargaining power. But again, the question is, unions are also controlled by certain groups. So unions also tries to bargain based upon their own group interest. So can the unions have an equal access to all the members and all the social group members or the genders? No, because unions are controlled by either male or dominated by particular groups. So always they try to have their own interest. So I think
okay.
To ask
but then, okay,
first question.
What is your take on unemployment as being presented by Professor Ghuman? What is your take on that? We understand inequality question that you talked about. We understand the labor participation rate is low, which is, and you also said something like that. What is your take on what is the overall unemployment? It's not all in India, throughout the world, almost all 100, 800, some more or less, you have this kind of.
Yeah.
So that is something which is very serious. Does it not talk against the system, the order of the system, which is completely against humanity? Does it not disprove the fact that the trickle-down theory is an illusion? Exactly. I want, you have been teaching economics, you should be able to enlighten us that what the theory is talking about, what in practice it is. He is talking about practice. No, what is practice?
The hardcore economic theory talks something. Hardcore economic theory tells us always that the growth takes care of everything. Like when we started with the liberalization, everybody said that liberalization process actually lead to rise in the actually with the rise in the technology, actually it is the contradictory what Abraham was mentioning. During the process of the liberalization, they said the there will be drastic decline in is what we are going to see in the future. That's what they said with the technology. But now we are seeing the other way around. There is technological growth has taken place, and there is also other side, unemployment also. Even if we look at the self-employment rates are also also declining. So now the question is that, can markets take care of everything? Markets cannot take care of everything in any country, actually. Any country, whatever may be the system they follow, capitalist, socialist, or mixed form, whatever it is.
Your textbook economics talk about the market is the only one which is something to take care of everything. Am I right?
Yeah. So now we need to focus on, other than growth, how we need to improve
another economics,
Yeah.
alternative economics. Yeah.
So other than the markets, what best we can look at to the structure first, then you move further. So without questioning the structure which is existing, always talking peripherally that this is the growth rate, this is what happens and all, I think that is not going to happen. That's what I truly believe.
That's absolutely fantastic. Now, Professor Ghuman, you.
Thank you. Let me first express my gratitude to Professor Sunil, Professor Abram, and Dr. Sridevi for very valuable comments. And let me start hurriedly with Professor Sunil's brief comment after when I stopped. In fact, I fully agree that theoretical contribution and theory is very, very important to dwell on these issues. But I dealt within my larger study, but for paucity of words and all that, I couldn't do that. One. Second, I fully agree with him that alternative economic model is very, very important. Because we have seen different modes of production since over the last 100 years across the world. But probably still there is a lot to find alternate. And Piketty also talks about one model, that is a social democratic system. That is, but still the fundamental question is that of inclusive growth. That remains still. And in India also, Monte Carlo, when he says inclusive growth and faster growth in 11th plan, and more inclusive and more faster growth in 12th plan. But midterm appraisal says that on the inclusive growth, we have not been able to achieve much. But on the other hand, he says that agriculture doesn't give us the 8%, 9%, 10% growth. But I do question him that whenever agriculture fares well, poverty reduces, employment is generated, and still you will have to focus on these issues. You cannot ignore agriculture on the altar of growth, GDP growth. I do not agree with him on that count. But at the same time, when we look at the recent years, 5-7 years, we experienced the highest unemployment rate over the last 45 years. And we claim that we have done that, we have done this, but hard data and facts don't support that. This is, but again, question is how to get out of it. That I think is a larger question, probably beyond my capability. Probably I will not be able to handle that question. Now then, coming to Professor Vinoj Abraham, I'm thankful to his very valuable comments, but micro view is important, micro studies, and micro may probably leads to macro, and macro give you better understanding. What's the mechanism through which jobless and jobless growth? Probably he points to technology is one, but the protagonists of technology, and we cannot initiate technology at the same time. We cannot reverse technological breakthrough. Rather, it is going ahead and cutting edge technology. We are moving from already existing technology to artificial intelligence and all that. And I wonder, driverless driving, where we will reach at the end, and what will the human being do, all that. We will have to think about alternatives. But in fact, ideologically, what's the problem is that access to education, health, skill, and technology is a serious problem. That excludes larger sections of people from technological adaptations. And unemployment due to technology, it's very difficult to blindly agree with it, because those who argue for technological growth, they say if one type of employment has gone, technology creates other types of employment, but that would need skilling, reskilling, and multi-skilling. And probably in the kind of multi-skilling, some people may be facing vulnerability and all that. So, but at the same time, technology is labor displacing, but also technology, it creates jobs as well. So what and where will be the trade-off between technology, how much technology and how much not technology? That is the issue which must be dealt with. Then collective bargaining of workforce. Of course, I think technology does affect the collective bargaining of the workforce. I have no evidence of it, but my hunch is that it does affect the technological, the bargaining power. Then when he says institutional system to be put in place, I fully agree with that maybe it's a welfare state, maybe it's something else. It has to be there, but because institutions set the rule of the game. Then coming to Dr. G. Sridevi's comment, economic inequality across the labor production markets, it's there. Nobody can deny it. Even in developed countries, even the wage differential is there. Social inequality, gender inequality is there. But at the same time, I think UNDP's concept or multidimensional poverty partially takes care of when it talks of education and health and all that, apart from income inequality. Then regarding females are not finding time for entering into paid work, my take is a bit different from that. I think low female work participation is maybe due to low wages and wage rate. And empirical studies do support it, because when there is a trade-off between outside paid work at a particular wage rate, and when they compare trade-off with the domestic work, probably the females prefer to work in the home rather than paid work. Some studies do support this. So I don't have much to agree, and keeping in view the time, probably Prof Sunil is also probably being at the clock. So I think I would stop here, but if there is anything else, I will try to. And I do know my limitations, and I do agree that this paper is not final. I probably know no paper is final that way. It is a continuing, evolving process, and probably our paper may lead to some further research by scholars. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Ghuman. I mean, I'm not yet over, but I must say that very important, relevant issues that you are raising at the right time. At the right time is because there is a section of academics, intellectuals diverting the attention of unemployment issue to COVID only, avoiding the attention from the inefficient system that is in place, that is working, and which is unable to produce employment. that is something, is a great conspiracy against the humanity that's taking place, which need to be recognized. I'm very frank and forth on that point. Number one, is there anybody who would like to participate in this discussion? I welcome anybody, Simi or anybody. Dr. Arjun, you are remaining silent. Simi? Yes, Simi,
Yes, sir.
yes.
It has been very interesting conversation, and of course, I learned a lot from Professor Ghuman's presentation and all the discussion that has gone, that has preceded. I'm just very encouraged to say, when you say that there are inefficiency in the system that leads to so many challenges in the employment scenario. Especially when I would just like to second what Professor Sridevi was mentioning, and when you were mentioning what are the possible solutions. So perhaps we need to directly address the inefficient patriarchal system that is there in place, which disallows to a lot of extent the female participation in the labor market. And as I just mentioned in my chat,
don't say, Simi, don't say inefficient. It's a barbaric patriarchal system. You put it this way, not inefficient.
Right.
It's a barbaric, it's a barbaric patriarchal system that do not allow the woman. Yeah, am I right?
Absolutely. Yes, yes, absolutely. I fully support this view. And unless and until there is a recognition or a cognizance of this fact from the system, from the people in the system, I don't think there can be a solution. Because I am a student of political science, and I believe that you may debate with me, but I strongly believe that politics really impedes all economic theories, all economics, and all our good insights which Professor Ghuman and yourself and others have spoken, that this is the solution or this is the way forward, we will not be able to achieve. That is a harsh reality. And very recently, when the Supreme Court also, Honorable Supreme Court also gave its one of its judgments that equal pay for equal work is not a fundamental right for any employee. It's in itself showcases the limitations under which we operate. Unless and until this directive principle of equal pay for equal wage for equal work without any discrimination is applied, perhaps we have reached that stage where we can really, our economic capacities as a country has increased, and there should be a start somewhere. And I understand that this would be uncomfortable to employers. Maybe there is a kind of pushback from the employers as to the women might outshine them in that respective capacity. I don't know what behavioral or what natural instinct is, but this could be uncomfortable. But once that policy is in place, I believe that things would fall in line in times to come, and this would be a more equitable place for living and also for working. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. It's a very, very. I really liked the point that you're making. You made. Anybody else who would like to? Because Simi's is a very important understanding, insightful comments he has made into the equal pay for the equal right, equality to be maintained even at that level, in that way. And you have to have you need to have a constitutional provision. It means that you need to institutionalize that culture. Unless and until that gets institutionalized, it will not have an operational moorings. It need to be institutionalized. You have the Scandinavian countries. Look at the experience of those countries. They have been able to going much beyond us. Some of these countries, not everything. And whereas that we are still hanging around, with the same stories for last 50, 70 years or so. And then again, another part of the story that what, as a student of political science, he pointed out very rightly, On the one hand, you have certain things which is being what is called being talked about, which is being enshrined in constitution, but in practice, nothing of that kind takes place. There's another big problem. It's not a question of systematic inefficiency, a question of betrayal. They are simply betraying. Who are those people? It's the powerful people. Let us bring this dimension, the power relation of the society. The powerful people, whether the male chauvinism or the most powerful capitalist, big capitalist, big moneyed people, powerful people in some form or the other. It is this power which really makes all the difference in practice. And therefore, we need to recognize this fact, and therefore we need to talk about as to how to get out of this kind of a power-centric relationship, which is something, which is suffocating the lives of the majority of the population of the country. May it be women, maybe the deprived of any section of the population, maybe the farmers, maybe anybody else for that matter. That is what exactly, first of all, we recognize, let us not beat around the bush. The enemy has to be identified. Who are the enemies? And this is precisely today, the younger people facing this kind of a crisis. And the next population census is going to say between 25 to 35 years or 45, I'm forgetting, this age group population is going to dominate in the whole population demographic structure. Now, you need to give a job. 26 lakhs or 50 lakhs of job in 5 years' time is nothing. You need to create job. The question is that when the children are being taught, and I know that I have written plenty of papers in economic and political earlier, and when I see this number of people in each village, you go to the unemployed people, educated, graduate, dropouts, and all, boys and girls, 20, 25, 30, like that on an average. They do not have any job, no work. Who is to be blamed? System, people, governance, politics, they are to be blamed. Okay, Simi wants to know, Simi's point is very, very real and so penetrative that we need to really understand. I mean, implication is extending her point. We need to understand the ground reality and how really it is possible for the system to absorb. I don't say the inefficiency, and that is a very polite word to express about the system. I say that the barbaric system, the treacherous system, the system that goes against the human interest, basically. Let's put it this way. We need to abandon the system and we need to have a new system of that kind. Is it not possible for to argue it? My constitution I'm talking about, within the same constitutional norms, is possible for us to work out on all that. Okay, I stop at that, but that is an immediate reaction from Simi's very interesting, provocative points she had made, very intellectually stimulating. Anybody else is there to speak?
Yes, sir. I just have one point to make.
Arjun, yeah.
Professor Piketty and others also argue and envisage that to tackle this problem of inequality, we must focus on direct tax. So what does Professor Ghuman think that as a solution, especially for
very good, very good.
Ours, developing country, because for corporate tax and others, we have been reducing it to
yes.
To revive our economic activities. And how do you see that taxation as a tool to curb that, or what are the other economic levers as you see? Because social security, national employment policy, other things we have been keep on discussing and government has been doing, but what in your view would be the solution for more equal and to have a full employment kind of scenario for our country?
Very, very interesting. Professor Ghuman.
In fact, this is very, very Simi and Arjun have raised very, very pertinent questions, and the comment by Prof Sunil, I really appreciate that. In fact, what Professor Sunil Ray was emphasizing, that the question is how to generate employment. The problem is not simply discrimination. The problem is where are the jobs and how to create employment. That is the issue. And of course, I fully agree with this, that direct tax or taxing the rich is very, very important. But what we have been observing over the period of time, particularly in India, maybe in other countries also, wealth tax across the board, across the countries is nowhere there, barring a couple of countries. That's one. Second is corporate tax, as has been said, is being reduced continuously.
Yeah.
And third is, if you look at the hard data from 1995 to 2017-18, you will find that the product wealth generated or value addition, most of the value addition has gone to the capital and the corporate sector and not to the labor workforce, not to the labor. So there is a serious drag on the share of wages over the period of time. Companies' income has increased over the time. Probably in 1995, it was 13%. Now it is 30%, probably. The evidence is there. So what I feel is, my take on that is, not systemic is very, very important. It is systemic. And if you agree with me, the state works for those who are owning the state. This is the issue. I read a small book of David Paul, who was a communist leader of UK, a founder member of. Now, if your state and institutions of state and governance and politics and economics are controlled by those who are to favor the particular class and not work for the people, then you can well imagine to whom they will work for. So I'm fully convinced that state works for those who are controlling the state. And over the period of time, particularly from 1980s onward, the state is being controlled by those who are working for corporate, who are working for capitalists, who are working for new liberal economic model and all.
Monopoly capitalist, monopolist.
Yeah. So for the last 40 years, you can well imagine they are working. And after 1980s, probably particularly 1990s, there is hardly any, you say, welfare state in most of the developed countries. Even Europe, Thatcherism and Reaganomics have destroyed all those. And probably the first prerequisite to put the things on track is social welfare state. And of course, not simply the social democratic system, but we will have to think what are the alternates. You may give any name to that system, but you will have to focus on the larger sections of the people. And I am fully convinced that if the larger sections of the people are deprived of, or even have the perception of deprivation or injustice, the things will not move on the right track. And it can put a serious threat to the political survival of the, and it's not in the interest of the well of people in the long run. So I think as Prof Sunil was referring to the kind of workforce that we are talking of demographic dividends, but it may be counterproductive if this issue is not addressed. Demographic dividends is a double-edged weapon. Absolutely. It can work this way or work that way. So we will have to focus on that. And if not, then results will be counterproductive, which is worrisome. And peace is prerequisite to development. The very growth and development will not be possible without peace. And shock doctrine, shock therapy is not the way. From every shock, we are trying to get to something, shock doctrine or shock therapy, all that. I think that is not the way. We must, even when your Naxalite problem is there, it is not simply a law and order problem. It is the skewed development problem and the appropriation of the resources by a section of the people. So I think we should focus on all these issues. That is the way. And system and systemic solutions. System must find systemic solutions. And lastly, I would say that the kind of class which is owning the state probably may not work for the larger sections of the people until and unless there are social strong social movements which can compel them. I'm aware that you can't wish away politics, but the politics have to be put on the right track, and strong social movements can compel the politicians and political parties to put it on the right track. And that's my take. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Very nice. Thank you so much. I will. Is there anybody who is interested to speak? Anybody is there? If not, then I'll conclude.
Yes, sir, please conclude. Yeah.
Anybody? Okay. Shall I conclude, Dr. Arjun?
Yes, please, sir. Yes.
Okay. That's absolutely fantastic. Now, Professor Ghuman, Dr. Sridevi, Abraham, Dr. Arjun, Dr. Simi, and my friends. They say, to be honest with you, it's a very interesting session. I learned quite a bit. Although I read his paper, but in the process of discussion, I did have learned quite a bit and all that. Let me explain my feeling, my understanding in three issues. On three issues, I will focus on three issues. One is a theoretical battle. Issues related to theoretical battle. Second is the empirical observations. That is what you could see. And the third is that how I myself have been addressing this problem. I would like to share in a very few moments. Nothing, I will not give a lecture, but very few. First is a theoretical battle. Now, I would like to ask the panelists, we have been taught free market economics, new liberalism, so on and so forth. The free market. Why does this free market exist? Is there any free market? I asked this question to many people. And some of the very, very important internationally, you just simply don't bother about the model, graph, mathematics, nothing. Tell me, explain me, how does the free market exist? Even today, had I been getting somebody who is from the liberal or the market economics, I challenge if he or she can really show me a free market model. It is illusion. It is something which can be created in the air. A set of logic which is psychologically convinced, which is convincing at psychological level, is a mental creation of a different kind. In practice, what is that you could see? In practice, it is what is called quasi-monopoly everywhere. I did a long study much earlier, and I found that what is the total concentration of what's called product wealth with how many people at the international level, the companies, how much they share. I mean, that is plenty of studies are there even now also. You find this quasi-monopoly, there is no perfect competition of that kind. There is no competition, no competitive economy. Mind it, when this competitive economy started, this creation of this theory after Adam Smith and all that, the classical political economy and then neoclassical economics, it is at that particular point of time, there are, they legitimized by what is called Darwin's theory, natural selection. Many of you will be knowing, but there's a very big distortion in politics. Huxley and Spinoza, to champion the cause of what is called new liberal economics, they misinterpreted Darwin's thesis, struggle for existence, who actually told struggle for existence, not survival of the fittest. Survival of the fittest was borrowed. It was first Huxley told, supported by Spinoza, and then they started seeing it fits into what's called explanation of the liberal economics. So if you can survive in this competitive world, it is for you. And natural selection, standard evolutionary theory talk about, that is environment creates you the species to survive. Environment, it is this this that is study that is called environment causes the change. Environment causes the change in species. Environment causes the change in species, natural selection, and from there survival of the fittest. So in the market, in the liberal market, in the competitive market, they call it a competitive market. So in this competitive market, if you are capable to survive, if you are capable to prove yourself fit, you will survive. Parallel to the natural selection theory. But mind it, this is not Darwin said. Darwin did say that natural selection. At the same time also never talked about survival of the fittest. He talked of struggle for existence. And again, I'm telling you, I read it thoroughly on this whole thing and said that it's a cooperation among the people, among the species. It's a cooperation. So even if the plant species, they cooperate with each other. The human species, the animal species, they cooperate with each other, survive. Cooperation. It doesn't mean they don't have the conflict. If there is a conflict, there is a resolution as well. But survival of the species never fits into that. The legitimacy came even from there also, only to cover from the days of the mercantilism, industrial revolution, the monopoly capital. It is only to cover up the functions of the monopoly capital. They still continuing today even. We never questioned that one. But mind it, there is another theory which is called niche construction theory. As I call this term, here, earlier environment causes the species to change. Here, that means if you have the environment, a person will be able to change himself or herself. Here, the people is the species, niche is the biological. I'm talking about evolutionary biology. Alternative is the species, is the individual. They create the atmosphere to change. Just reversing it. It is a part of this whole evolutionary theory. I'm not talking something new. And this is the right interpretation of today to seek for an alternative. And based on that, I have developed a different model of employment creation that has influenced me quite a bit of niche construction theory. Now, this, when you have oligopolistic or the is what is called quasi-monopoly situation, but then you're teaching people, everybody, this is the theory of economic growth, and the economic growth, based on the perfect competition, based on the all illusionary ideas and ideology on the theory that you have a set of econometrics, you set of the econometrician, you set of this, all these people and all that. Now, I was going through some literature, especially from the students who really raised the issue in 2015-16 after the Great Recession, the collapse. All over the world, especially the Western countries, students came out, especially the economics department. They'd say that we do not want to hear such a cock and bull stories. We want to hear the practice. And then alternative economic theory, a forum was created in Germany. I had some correspondence and I read quite a bit of literature from them. And I found that how interesting they are really trying to understand the whole economics of a different kind altogether. I'm not going into it, but there are people who have been looking forward to see that how alternative economics can be worked out and all that. You first accept the fact you do not have perfectly competitive market. It's an illusion. And we are teaching the student illusion. We are not teaching, we are trying to take the students away from the practice. So in practice, if there is a monopoly situation, if the oligopoly situation, let it work. Today, this is concentration of wealth that you're talking about, is the result of that one. And this is not the first time. When I was doing a PhD, at that time also there are a number of people who are talking about the concentration of wealth. This has been studied ever since you have the mercantilism and industrial capitalism 200 years ago. And Adam Smith also did the same studies. He changed, and then Protestant capitalism came into being, saying that if you work very well, you'll be rewarded. If you don't work, God says that you have to work. So got the legitimacy from a different way of Protestant capitalism took place. I'm not getting into that. But legitimacy, religious legitimacy through Protestantism came about to say that you work efficiently and then you'll be able to win the world. And it's whose fault? You have the technology, you have the money, you have the capital. And therefore, try to see that it's possible for you to work in a way that you would like to maximize your profit. So all the rationality assumptions, all that came up. Today, the planning board, I mean, the planning Niti Ayog, all the experts that are sitting there, even this one also, they are all, even earlier also, Manmohan Singh time also, all these people. I mean, ever seen, not Manmohan Singh, even right from the beginning, you have seen Sukhma. Even after independence, you had plenty of experts from America that started flowing over here in India to shape up Indian destiny. Huh? We know that all the stories. Now, question is where we are going now. Where is the Lewis model coming up? Where is the employment generation taking place in that way? Let us question that part. So if the system does not say anything from that, we need to be prepared to say that get out of this system. We must really abandon the system. We must look for the new system to think about. We cannot go on repairing and from here to there, from one corner to another corner can go ahead and then say that this is how it is possible. This is the first theoretical attack that I'm saying that. Second is the empirical thing that I talked about. You know, this empirically that you could say that distress employment, something which has been really, I mean, what Professor Ghuman said is very correct. 70%, even I also studied this one, 70% of the people are what is called vulnerable, very poor people in the name of employment that has been taking place. But actually is something living with poverty, that's it. But you see the employment taking place and all that, that's something which is, so you have a series of problems of this kind. The trickle down theory, it never trickles down. It concentration takes place. And then another one, inequality that talked about. You know this Harare? I don't know how many of you have really read this book by Harari, 21 lessons for the 21st century. But it's Harari. You will know Harari. You must be knowing about this one. One of the chapter, he writes inequality is taking different dimensions altogether. You have the concentration of wealth. Now, what is the inequality? Those who have the control over the data, information, they are going to rule the entire world. That is what he writes in 5-6 pages, fantastic note, and how this is happening. So you have a monopoly capital, you have a semi-oligopoly market, you have got concentration of wealth, you have the what's called skewed distribution everywhere and all that. But now people may not be able to land constitution and this and that at the international level. It is something of that kind. Inequality at the international level is what is called, if you have the access, control over the key data information, the whole world is at your feet. That is what it talks about. And concentration, inequality is taking place from. That is another biggest form of inequality going to come about in the days or months to or years to come at the international level. That is what he has indicated. I'm not getting into more on that kind of thing. You have got varieties of inequality form. But looking at what's the Indian condition today we are living with, we do not want to get into all this jargon, not any model. I want to see my people there, my brothers, my sisters, my son and daughter, everybody gets some employment, some job, reasonable, dignified life. You talked about technology. You have to have an appropriate technology. People did work in 1970s on appropriate technology. Now the question, the appropriate technology you need to have. You cannot impose a technology which is not really appropriate for you to generate income and employment. That is what we have talked about, but never happens. Why doesn't it happen? Because market forces. Who regulate the market forces? Moneyed people, the money, the capital system. The free enterprise system is capital system. The monopolist, the oligopolist, these are the people who are there controlling the whole market forces. And they say, we say that's a perfectly competitive market, but actually it is not. So they mediate their interest through the government. They mediate their interest through the government. So when the government policy is there, it is their interest that gets reflected. That's it. Let us try to understand, is it that 75 years we have to take to understand this particular phenomena? Very unfortunate academicians are there. We would like to survive by talking about the same thing for 50 years, 60 years, 70 years. That is what exactly. Now the question is that this is what this appropriate technology we have a village, we have agriculture, we have people to work, we can have agro-based production, we can have resource and animal-based production, we can have varieties of what is called activities to take place based on the resources that we have. We can develop ourselves. We can ourselves think about what our forefathers were doing and then able borrow, if necessary, technology from outside. We do not want to become a very, very rich people. We want to survive with dignity. Is it not possible for us to ensure that with the given technology that we have and the resources, the environment that we have, it is possible. So the question is that what is called you borrowing the method, borrowing the technology, borrowing the idea from the West, development idea. Lewis did in 1954. They tried to do, and then all economics, trained in America and other countries, they started applying the Lewis model. We have been taught Lewis model. Today I am antagonizing Lewis model employment generation every forum. Is there anybody who can question me? I am giving an open challenge. Oh no, not possible. Is there any free market economics who can say that it's possible to generate or create employment to the system? Is there anybody? I am looking for a literature at least, or to hear somebody who can tell that it's possible for us to create employment and 25 lakhs or 50 lakhs over a period of 6 years, 5 years, it all makes no sense. We have already reserved army of unemployed people, more than few crores. And then addition going on. Where is that we are going towards? At the same time, we have a discrimination. We have got what's the technology determination. We have got everything, the concentration of wealth, and so on and so forth. And at the same time, we do not have what's called enough consumption power, as Professor Ghuman said, and therefore purchasing power is very less, and therefore it has a multiplier effect, which is negative for the investment. So those things are there. It is the very few concentration of wealth and concentration of purchasing power that is yours observed. Concentration of purchasing power at a few hands. That is what talks about. So therefore it is very, and last, Professor Ghuman, I want to share with you, I have developed a model. It's a birth of an alternative development paradigm, unfolding of transformative mode of production. You talked about mode of production, a transformative mode of production. This literature is available there with IMPRI. This is I've developed. I would like to share with you. And this is the different model altogether for implementation development. Is replace the system that you have today here working. And how really employment, I developed a model for the state of Bihar and also got it published, when I was working with the Sinha and then did it, employment creation. I won't say generation, employment creation. How is it possible within the given system? That I have worked on it. And in case any of you is interested, I like to share this one, birth of an alternative development paradigm. This is something which I've worked on. It is being brought out by a Germany institution, which is located at Delhi in the German Fellowship. So it's an occasional paper, they have brought it out. In case Professor Ghuman, you are interested or anybody, I would like to share with you and get your comments. Yeah.
Yes, Professor Sunil Ray, I'm very much interested in that working paper which you have developed. If you can kindly send me.
Yeah, I'll email you. It is there. Your email is there with IMPRI, your email is there.
It's with Dr. Arjun and Simi.
Yeah. I'll email you, and Professor Arjun also, Dr. Arjun also has got this copy with him. So
I will appreciate if you share with me, please.
Yeah, definitely. I'll do it. It's a great thing that I will get comments and I'll improve it upon. This is something which is an attempt that I made to see that it's sort of. Thank you this much. And these are the things, this discussion will go on. But only one thing, the message that I could get from you, and we must call spade a spade. Let's not beat around the bush. Let's say this is not possible employment creation in this system. Say this one. And it is amply proved that this system is incapable of creating employment on a sustainable basis. It's impossible. We can create distress employment. As 70% of the population right there, distress employment. But we cannot generate or create employment that will give us dignified life. How to go about it? Thank you so much. Thank you all. Thank you, Professor Ghuman, and all both the discussant for their very, very important contributions. Dr. Simi and Dr. Arjun, I thank you so much for giving this opportunity to be together to us and to explain, to express, to talk about the pertinent, the most relevant point today, the challenge that we're facing today, the entire, not only country, the entire globe today. The globe is completely organized, manipulated, completely controlled by the capital system. I don't say capitalism, but capital system. There's a difference between the two. This capital system is something that we need to impact maybe more or less here and there. But today India is facing a serious crunch, tomorrow some other country will be facing. And that has been the story everywhere today. Never think that that country is better off, that this country is worse off. Nothing of that kind. Everybody is a matter of time. So it's necessary for us to challenge this kind of system to get out of. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this one, for giving this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Yes.
This has truly been very, very encouraging, and I heartily believe that this entire discussion is going to add in the rich literature and evidence of how we can have an employment situation, a decent employment situation in the country, and even provide a learning lesson to other countries around the world. So thank you so much. I would like to formally conclude and by presenting the vote of thanks on behalf of the IMPRI Center for Human Dignity and Development to our eminent speaker, Professor Ranjit Singh Ghuman. Thank you, sir, for sparing your time, for sparing your valuable time and speaking about your paper, Global Unemployment and Inequality during 1991 to 2019, and sharing your reflections from the secondary data. Thank you, sir. We were truly enlightened and we learned a lot. Thank you so much. I would like to thank our panelists, Professor Vinoj Abraham, and also to Professor G. Sridevi for sharing your rich insights and adding to the deliberation. Thank you so much for your valuable time. And lastly, to the moderator of this series and also of the session, Professor Sunil Ray. Thank you, sir, for truly collaborating with this kind of a discussion that has really set the bars really, really high, and for sharing your thoughts on employment and inequality situation in the country, and for highlighting so many important issues. We are truly grateful to all our audience here watching us here on Zoom and also on Facebook Live, and also to all those who would be listening to the program, watching the program on YouTube and on our various podcasts. Thank you so much. And I would like to end. Thank you so much to all of you. Have a good day. Thank you, sir.